Welcome the Commissioner of Education, Stephen Pryor, who is our education policy leader for the state, who will be moderating this session on the Common Core, Next Steps College Readiness. Joining him today is Richard Lane, National Governors from the National Governors Association. He's a Division Director, Education of the Education Division, and we're thrilled to have that national perspective on this panel. Dr. Diana Roberge-Wenzel, our Chief Academic Officer for the state of Connecticut, is here with us as well to bring her expertise. Keith Savigny, who is going to absolutely be my favorite person on this panel because he's one of my teachers, and is our 2012 Hartford Public Schools Teacher of the Year, is joined also by Paige McLean, who is Senior Director, Strategic Partnership for Achievement First. We also are joined by Dr. Thomas DeFranco, who is the Dean of the NEAG School of Education. We know how important it is to have our land-grant, state-grant university represented and having a voice in this conversation. And Dudley Williams, who is the chairman of the Nellie Mae Education Foundation, bringing a unique foundation perspective to this conversation. So with this, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen Pryor. Commissioner?
Thank you, Superintendent. It's truly my pleasure to be at this event, and Superintendent, I want to commend you on producing it, and more so, congratulate you on the achievements that are themselves being focused upon today. Hartford is truly leading the way, and it's impressive, and Chairman Poland and Mayor Segarra, the partnership that you've established with the Superintendent in carrying out these reforms is exemplary, and we hope and expect to see it advance even further. So thank you once again. I'm so pleased, Christina, that you had the insight and the foresight to set this panel with the subject of the Common Core state standards. It's so important that not just on the national level, but on the local level, we have intensive conversations about the Common Core and what it means, and that's what we intend to do today. I want to make another notation. Kelvin Rodan has been exemplary in putting this event together. I noticed that both Kelvin and the superintendent, Dr. Kishimoto, have new haircuts. I want to note that I did not receive the memo on the new haircut. I did, however, from the General Assembly receive a haircut. Thank you. There's more to come, so get ready. Now, you thought that this was a comedy confab here at the Bushnell. You now know you were wrong. It is, however, a choral presentation, and Dr. Reginald Mayo and Dr. Christina Kishimoto and I are about to offer you a trio. What was our choral selection today, Christina? Do you recall? No, we'll move on to the panel. Neither do I. Thanks. You know, you're all hopefully very grateful that none of us remember. None of us remember the song. But I'm so pleased to be here with such a distinguished panel, and you really are looking at the state and local leaders who are making it happen for the Common Core. And I'm going to ask the panelists, having already been introduced by their title, to talk to us in a couple of sentences about their background and their responsibilities. Truly a couple sentences. And I'm going to ask Mr. Dudley Williams to begin. Dudley, would you introduce yourself, please, sir?
Yes. My name is Dudley Williams. I am from Stamford, Connecticut. I have had the privilege of serving on the board of the Nellie Mae Foundation for almost 10 years now, and currently serve as chair. And the foundation's focus is support of public education in the 6 New England states, and we've made a major investment around the implementation expansion of student-centered learning practices. And the implementation of the Common Core is sort of directly in our wheelhouse in our strategy in terms of improving public education.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tom DeFranco. I'm the Dean at the NEAG School of Education, and I also am a faculty member in the mathematics department up at UConn.
Good morning. I'm Paige McLean. I'm the Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships at Achievement First. I have the privilege of looking outside of Achievement First and working with our host districts in Connecticut, in Bridgeport, Hartford, and New Haven, really just trying to figure out what we can share with and learn from each of the districts where we have schools.
I'm Keith Savigny. I'm the 2012 Hartford Public Schools Teacher of the Year. I teach 7th and 8th grade science. Thank you. I teach 7th and 8th grade science at Annie Fisher STEM Magnet School and have been teaching there for 3 years. I've been in the Hartford district for 6 and used to teach at Hartford Public High School. And I have the daunting task of representing every single Hartford public school teacher in the entire district today, so I'm going to do my best.
I'm Richard Lane. I'm the Director of Education, for the Education Division for the National Governors Association. We are, in effect, a consulting service to governors across the country to help improve the quality of public education. And as one of the 2 lead organizations, we were the lead facilitator in the development of the Common Core State Standards. Prior to that, I ran education work at the Wallace Foundation, doing a national school leadership initiative, and had spent some time in Illinois as the deputy at the State Board of Education.
Thank you. I'm Diana Robert-Wenzel, Chief Academic Officer for the state of Connecticut. I believe the really, truly only a couple sentences was perhaps aimed at me now that we've worked together for a few months. And it's a pleasure to be here prior to coming to the state where I have responsibility for the implementation and articulation of the Common Core State Standards and standards in all curricular areas, as well as the implementation of the Smarter Balanced Assessment program that will be coming and assessments in all areas. I was with the Hartford Public Schools and proud to have been a member of Dr. Kishimoto's cabinet, so very happy to be here today.
Terrific. We expect this session to last approximately an hour. I'm going to offer not even introductory remarks, but just a brief preface, and then ask questions of the panelists. And I'm going to ground my quick preface in recently released results from the PISA exam. One of the purposes of the Common Core State Standards is to ensure that we are reaching for national, even global standards in our education system. And we know that for too long there's been a haphazard approach where states and even localities have fashioned their curriculum and instructional systems, their underlying standards, and their correlated or should be correlated assessments in ways that have been, as I referenced, haphazard. And there has been no clarity as to whether we are in fact aiming for those national and international norms in our curricula. And I think especially urban communities have suffered in that there's been a difficulty in establishing the bar in the right place and knowing that we're providing true equitable education where there's equal opportunity for all and where we are especially investing in those locations that may be high poverty and currently low performing to ensure that they reach these appropriate college and career-ready levels on par with the nation and world. There was recently a release by a group called America Achieves regarding PISA data. PISA is another exam administered by the Program for International Student Assessment, and PISA globally samples students and determines among nations how a given country is performing. And on a recent exam, the United States performed worse than 23 countries which had higher averages than the US in mathematics, 23 in mathematics, 18 in science, and 9 in reading. Not the kind of distinction we seek to be in that, at that level. Those are dubious distinctions, if distinctions at all. But one of the other interesting revelations from America Achieves is that it's not just about poverty that the United States is in these middling or even on a relative basis low performance levels internationally in key subject areas. Because what America Achieves did is it, working with partners, disaggregated data by socioeconomic status or by what they determined to be socioeconomic quarters or quartiles of the data. And they looked at the second to the top quarter, the second to the top of the 4 quarters, to say, well, how are students doing that are roughly stated middle-class students in the United States? And we were outperformed by 15 countries in science, 24 countries in math. In the 3rd quarter, going down in the socioeconomic status quartile structure, we were eclipsed by 31 countries in math, 25 countries in science. Folks, it's not just about poverty. It's not about the fact that simply about the fact that as we celebrate in the United States, we have a more diverse population. By no means is it about the fact that we have income gradations and that we are such a rich, diverse culture. It's about something else, and that something else, at least in substantial part, is the quality of our education system. Now that may, for all of us in this room, go without saying, but for too long in the United States, I think there's been a failure to recognize it. There's been an approach as pertains to the states and to the localities for that matter, that's been laissez-faire. There's been rhetoric regarding setting a high bar and goals for all students, but we haven't met it, and we haven't gotten there. Now, the conclusion of my preface, simply focusing on this single study, is that there are bright spots. So one of the other things that in disaggregating to the school level and actually doing school samplings that America Achieves found is that there are, for example, very specific illustrative examples, 3 non-selective high schools in Fairfax, Virginia, that outperform the average of nearly every country in the world. And one of the cities in which I previously lived is Newark, New Jersey. There's an outstanding public charter school there known as North Star Academy, which gave birth to the larger Uncommon Schools network. There was proof that high poverty schools can break through and excel as well. We all know that, but it's nice to see the proof. North Star Academy outperformed all but 9 countries in reading with a high poverty and largely minority student population. It can be done. It's happening here in Hartford under this superintendent and this school board and this mayor. You are making breakthroughs in many of your schools. Some of your schools are truly excelling. So, what does it mean that we're establishing these Common Core state standards? How do we ensure that we do set ourselves on the right pathway as a district here in Hartford, as a state here in Connecticut, and as a country to be on par with the best in the world? We expect nothing less of our students to ensure that of our schools for our students. We expect that our students will be college and career ready. So, my first question, and I'll give you some preparatory moment, Richard. My first question, Richard, you have one of the best perches to look at the national scene, and you've been helpful to us here in Connecticut. And one of my questions is just to return to the premise of my preface, that we have this problem in that we are slipping relative to other countries on certain measures. My question in a general form is, will the Common Core get us there? Is it one of the tools that will get us there, and why?
So first, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and thank you for the information that's been provided, because I think these convenings where we profile promising opportunities, successes for kids is what keeps us moving. That said, remember, higher standards are just aspiration if nothing else changes. Right. So, I love this. Thank you. So on one hand, somebody said before, or one of the earlier speakers is, students are really good at rising to or lowering to the expectations we place on them. And what the standards, the Common Core state standards do is once and for all, set the standards not at what we think students should know, not what a third grade teacher feels that kids are able to do, but says, what is it that students need to be able to do, to be able to master by the end of their high school so that they're on par for success in post-secondary education? Not for what we're currently setting standards are, which is to get them out of high school and let them be somebody else's problem. And let me just give you really tangible data for what that means. And Stephan, I know this is a priority for the governor and for you as you elevate up the standards, the expectations across this state. What we've been able to do is look at the comparison where states are and how they define proficiency versus where we think the Common Core will set proficiency. Right? So 2 data points. One is for 4th grade reading in this state, 2011 data, 75% of the kids across the state were deemed proficient on the state assessment. Right? 75%, not bad, you're doing pretty well. On the Common Core, which the assessments will come spring of 2015, those numbers will probably drop to about 40%. Because what we're doing is we're ratcheting up the bar. So at 4th grade, remember what we said is 12th grade you need to be here, and we're just back mapping where we need to be. In most cases, when we're doing that, we're not preparing our kids to a high enough level. That's 4th grade. 8th grade, just a quick number, 85% of your kids are proficient in math in 2011. You feel great. The reality, when the Common Core comes in play, just under 40% of your kids will be proficient. 8th grade math. So on one hand, we kind of will say, and we do this conversation across the country, it's pretty depressing. But I take the more positive look, which is it finally gives us the anchor, the line in the sand that says now we know what we need to be able to do. And what that says is we need to make a lot more changes. So it is an essential element to moving kind of the progress and the quality of public education, because if we don't have that line in the sand, we'll all feel, yeah, we're doing pretty good with our teachers and our principals and our community and our partnerships, but nothing really changes. So this puts a line in the sand that says now the partnerships that the superintendent's talking about, the commitments that all of you are making, now the only thing I would add to the superintendent's words that you had up there about promising and accelerating, I'd put urgency. Urgency, because every time a child steps out of 3rd grade and goes to 4th grade, it's 1 year you've lost to really accelerate their pace. So,
thank you, Richard. We're going to return to the subject of the expected drop in scores, which you've described very ably around the way in which the bar is moving, and talk about what we're doing to communicate that and what that should mean to parents and to students and to communities. But we're not going to do that at the moment. I want to flag that, and I'm going to shift to Dean Tom DeFranco. Dr. DeFranco, we've worked very closely together. There is enormous wisdom emanating from UConn and from NEAG in particular, and Tom, you've been a tremendous partner. One of the things that you've done is you've participated, among many duties, is you've participated in our Educator Preparation Advisory Council, which is an effort to re-look at the way in which we prepare teacher candidates for this state. What do you think is going to have to happen in the realm of teacher preparation and leader preparation to adjust to the Common Core?
Well, first of all, welcome, and let me first say congratulations to the teachers, the administrators, and the leaders here in Hartford for the progress they're making in moving the needle on the academic performance of the children here in Hartford, as well as improving their lives. So I want to start by saying that. I'm going to try and answer that question from 2 viewpoints. First, as the Dean of the NEAG School of Education, and also as a faculty member who teaches mathematics at the University of Connecticut. I'd also like to define college readiness as not just having students come to our doorsteps, but also making sure that they are career ready. And as we all know, that right now, what we mean by career ready has a lot to do with the STEM-related fields. So I'm going to try and frame that question in a little bit broader context, and in particular with respect to the math standards. So currently I teach, as I said, a large calculus class, about 250 students. And actually, as a result of being here today, I may miss the class. So you guys are going to make 250 students very, very happy. So
we'll all write you a note, though, Dean.
That's right. Thank you. What I would say is that the students in my class represent the brightest class of students who have ever enrolled at UConn at this point. And generally, they perform very well in my class, and that's because they've been able to master the skills they need to do well on tests. And while these students have mastered skills of the calculus, what I would say is they have not acquired what I would call mathematical know-how on how to use mathematics to solve problems. And the question is why? Well, if you speak to mathematicians, what they will tell you that mathematics should be viewed as a science of patterns and as a sense-making tool to make sense of the world. And this is referred to as what we call the mathematician's aesthetic. And basically, that's the ability to think about mathematics, to analyze and understand problems, and to see structure in problems so that you can eventually solve problems. Most students never acquire this aesthetic, yet it is what most people involved in STEM-related fields do on a day-to-day basis. Therefore, helping students acquire this aesthetic to actually see structure in mathematics and solve problems is really important if we're going to develop the next generation of economic drivers for the state of Connecticut. But the good news is that the Common Core state standards were developed to promote both procedural and conceptual understanding as well as this mathematical know-how. However, there is a caveat to this. The Common Core standards represent a blueprint of the way students learn and what they need to know, and that represents an epistemological point of view and not a pedagogical point of view. So translating the math and the English language arts standards into instructional routines with rigor, coherence, and with fidelity will become a critical issue. So how can higher ed help pre-service and in-service teachers implement these standards? Well, in a recent article in Education Week, the lead writers of the math standards crafted a publisher's criteria document to ensure alignment of curriculum materials with the math standards. So now, working with this document, university faculty, that is content specialists as well as educators, can work collaboratively with K-12 teachers to develop or adopt curriculum that is aligned with the standards. For example, recently, an elementary school in New Jersey just adopted the Singapore math textbook series because they believed that that series was aligned closely with the math standards in the Common Core. But developing curriculum standards that are aligned with the Common Core is critical. However, equally important is a teacher's ability to implement this curriculum with fidelity. Higher education faculty can work with pre-service and in-service teachers to enhance their understanding of math or literacy and help them acquire not only the procedural fluency they need, but to acquire a deep understanding of the discipline through experimentation, argumentation, problem solving, and mathematical discourse. This needs to occur at the university level. What I can tell you is that math departments, College of Liberal Arts and Science need to talk very closely with schools of education to ensure that the courses that our education students are taking are aligned with the kind of work that will promote student achievement. This work also has to take place in teacher preparation programs and as well as in having comprehensive and sustained professional development opportunities for all the K-12 teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I'd like to ask my colleague Diana to describe the state's role. First, I just want to say that Diana has already played an invaluable role in restarting our process of assisting districts in preparing for the Common Core, and I'm very grateful to Christina for the opportunity to draw upon the wisdom that was in large part gained here in Hartford and for the incredible partnership that we have, district and state. But Diana Roberge-Wenzel, you're doing a terrific job. Would you please share with the audience what it is that the state is doing and what our intent is to do going forward, because I know we're just getting started.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you asked. Thank you, Commissioner.
Very hard to predict that question.
So in terms of the standards, I really want to build on what the two previous speakers have said about the standards. The Common Core state standards really are our promise to our children and their families that we will make sure that year by year they are climbing that mountain and being ready for college and career and for the skills they need in their adult lives to be successful and to be able to provide for their families. So how do we get there? The standards really give us a clear sense of what kids need to know at each grade level. They also, I really appreciate Dr. DeFranco's points about the practices in mathematics, and similarly in language arts, they give us a sense of some of the how it needs to happen. The coming next generation of assessments will give us some guidance in whether or not our kids are moving in the right direction at the rate that they need to. But all of that leaves out the most important ingredients. And the most important ingredients in making this promise real for our kids are the teachers and school leaders that make it happen on a daily basis. So our approach at the state is one of guidance and support for the people who are doing the work, which are the teachers and the school leaders. And you will notice, or some of you will have noticed at our website, hopefully you've been checking our website. I know that perhaps that's, that some of you have fallen out of the habit, so I would really ask as a personal favor that after you get back to your desk today, you make us a favorite again. Because great things are happening at the State Department of Education website, and a lot of those great things are happening because the power of collaboration with, for instance, folks like from the team at UConn and with, folks at GE, represented here by Dudley, and folks all over the state that have come together to support our work in the first 3 months of our Common Core restart. We have convened a group of content experts in Common Core Math and in Common Core English Language Arts that have taken a close look at some of the most promising resources for teachers and school leaders and district leaders that are available. Because one of the fabulous opportunities of this moment in education is that we stand shoulder to shoulder with 45 other states in making this promise to kids. So one of the great opportunities is that we're not going it alone. There's a lot of fabulous resources that have been developed, and it can be a little bit overwhelming, I think, for teachers in the classroom or teacher coaches to know which of these tools is really very likely to get our kids where they need to be. So our first step in our restart was really providing clear guidance to leaders and to classroom teachers about which resources are the most promising. And each week right now at our website, you'll see more resources being added. Some of those have been developed right here in Connecticut with the help of fabulous teachers and leaders. Some of those are from other states that are having the same goals for their kids. So, and you'll have some, you'll see some guidance there. Increasingly each week you'll see more guidance about how to use those tools. I'm very proud to also piggyback on what Dr. DeFranco said about the publisher's criteria. As a state, our commissioner signed on to the use of the publisher's criteria. What that means is that we will use a valid tool to support our districts in their resource choices. The publisher's criteria is available at our website, both at the math and ELA sites, and most importantly, at the Common Core button. So when you look at that State Department of Ed website, up on the left, I think we're at this point, like the third button, we all know we should be the top button, but we'll get there, right? So please click on your Common Core button and see that. In the months coming, you'll look forward to more than just resources, but also professional learning support for teachers and school leaders, both in terms of this spring into the summer and next fall throughout the next school year. That resource support and professional development will focus on the integration of the Common Core with the educator effectiveness as well, so that when we're looking at classrooms and we're looking at the effectiveness of teachers and leaders, we're looking from a lens of, are we advancing kids with what they most need to know and in the way we know they need to learn, so that we're really clear that as we work to be very effective, it's toward what we've promised our kids. So we look forward to working together in the future, and I could go on all day. I have the sense that perhaps it's time for a different question.
That's perfect. That was great. Thank you. Thank you, Diana. Keith? It's so important that we request and we receive the teacher's perspective. We're so grateful that you, as Teacher of the Year, are here to give your own perspective. The reality is that unless teachers in the Hartford system, throughout the Connecticut systems, embrace the Common Core and find it useful and are able to attain its goals, we won't get anywhere. So talk to us a little bit about your perspective on the Common Core and what do you think it might do for teaching and learning in our state?
Great. Well, I guess I want to speak to that in two different parts. First off, I think that the Hartford Public School teachers are ready, willing, and ready to push hard to attack the transition to Common Core. I think we're thankful to know that reform is here and that we're going to be progressing as a state. But I think that one of the first questions that's on lots of teachers' mind here in Hartford, and for me it's kind of been really addressed today, is when we talk about raising the standard, when we talk about educating the whole child, how do we do that, and are we really doing that? Because as teachers, one of the first things we realize is that there's other mitigating factors besides just what happens in the four walls of our classroom that impact student achievement. And for me, I don't even know if they're still here, but Dr. Martin and Angela Colantonio, this is fantastic. This really brings to life what a lot of us have been saying in the school district, that there's all these questions that are going just beyond what's happening in your classroom. For us to address Common Core, we have to ask questions like, well, how does Common Core relate to a kid who's learning the English language? How does it relate to a kid who's potentially truant because they're at home caring for a younger sibling? How do we address the kid who's coming to school hungry and going home to bed hungry at night? How do you address the kid who's walking to school in the dark through a dangerous neighborhood? And unless we start addressing those things first, we're going to be really playing catch up for a long time. But for me, just sitting here listening to you people, this has really rolled the curtain back for me to understand that these things are being addressed. People are acknowledging that they're happening in the state and that we're working towards reforming those too, and that we are trying to educate the whole child. So one of the first things I would love to do is potentially get a cadre of teachers from our district to be at something like this so that we can see the bigger picture. And for me, it's been fascinating to know that you guys are out there trying to change things and improve the community, and that's fascinating to me. Knowing that I'm not alone validates not only who I am and what I do, but it shines a light on our future where previously we just kind of had this darkness of uncertainty. So that's kind of the educating the whole child piece. And then on to this Common Core piece, I think we all know it's here. I think we all know that we're upping the level of rigor, and I think we're all prepared for that. We've identified what the changes are going to be, but the question is how does that translate to the four walls of my classroom? How does that look? What does that feel like? What are students doing when we see that the bar is raised? So as an example, and I'm a little different because I'm a science teacher, and we're transitioning to the next generation science standards. So it's a little different for me, but just me specifically, when I first started teaching, I taught my science classes, and I thought that I was teaching them, very well. But then when I started working over at Annie Fisher, I realized, wow, there's this whole piece in the NGSS that talks about inquiry, and how do we raise the standard, and how do we raise the bar and make sure that our kids are asking questions and driving their own experience, right? And when I started at Annie Fisher, there was that push to make sure that teachers were supported, that we were trained with that, and we partnered with the Connecticut Science Center for 3 years of training to adjust our teaching strategies to make sure that it was student-centered and that it was very rigorous. And I've become a completely different teacher because of that. So I think that that's one of the things is really focusing on teacher development and how does this look in the classroom. The other thing I think we need to focus on is the fact that not all schools are equipped equally to handle this transition. So we've got charter schools, we've got magnet schools, we've got neighborhood schools. And for us, we had people that were specifically at our school ready to quarterback the changes that we're seeing. A lot of us were given developmental leave time to develop things like standards-based report cards that are aligned to the Common Core. And are we necessarily going to be able to get that for all of our schools? And I think that that's a big thing for us. Beyond that, I think that one of our big focuses needs to be assessment. Not only are we raising the bar, that's great, but how are we getting there? Do we have the tools in our classroom to really determine in progress, is that kid making the gains day by day to really ensure that they're getting where they need to go? So that's going to be a big change for us. And of course, last but not least, the big factors are always time and money. Because for teachers, we have a ton of stuff that we're doing on a daily basis, and we love it. We love being in our classrooms. We love working with our kids. But the extra development, the extra infrastructural things that we need to make sure we're doing require extra time, and we need to make sure that that's there. And not only do we need that time, we need the resources to make sure that that's implemented. Even simple things like testing, it's going to be done, for a lot of it, it's going to be computer-based. Are those technological resources there and available at every school, for every student, for every teacher, for every classroom? So,
Terrific.
thank you.
Keith, great answer, a lot of insights. It is certainly self-evident why you are the Teacher of the Year. Thank you for your remarks. And we're very grateful for your contributions. Dudley, putting you on notice, I should note that Dudley Williams has multiple credentials for serving on this panel. It should be noted that he previously worked across the street at the State Department of Education. He is an alum of the CSDE. And with his affiliations both with the GE Foundation and with Nellie Mae, he's uniquely positioned to talk about the partnerships that are involved in promoting the Common Core. And Dudley, what I wanted to ask you was, what is the role for philanthropy and for nonprofit partners from the perspective thereof, and also from the perspective of a school district like Hartford or other districts in the state? What ought such districts be striving for in the way of partnerships to carry out this work?
Thank you, Commissioner. Multiple answers to that question. In terms of partnerships, from foundations and the business community, I think it's important for the business community to embrace the Common Core and be very vocal about why it's important. It's one thing to talk about increasing standards and PISA scores and things like that, but that it boils down to, in a very big way, our competitiveness as an economic entity, this city, state, and country. And that's where the real issue is. And I think it's important that particularly the business community be out in front and talking about why the Common Core needs to take place, why it's important that we really educate our students to go into the workplace and to be truly career ready, and what career ready means in 2013. And that's a very important piece of this, and I think the business community is in the best position to champion this cause. This is not just simply another educational fad, and it's too often it's easy to dismiss the next new thing in education. This is much bigger than that, and I think the business community, it's important that the business community really take a lead role in articulating why the Common Core is important. In terms of supporting school districts, I think both the philanthropic community and the business community has a real role in doing what it can to ensure that school districts have the wherewithal and the resources to do this the right way. This is a big lift. We're talking about doing a lot of things differently, and we need to take a different approach. It can't be an unfunded mandate. Most unfunded mandates are flawed implementation mandates, and that can't happen here. We can't
Which
take...
means that you don't like my haircut. Thank you. I told you it was going to get worse.
But for example, we can't take our usual approach to, which is too often, I'm not saying it is in Hartford anymore, but too often the approach to professional development where you hand a teacher a binder in June and say, read it, figure it out, and be ready to go in September. That's not going to work with the Common Core. Support for teachers needs to be sustained and ongoing. It needs to be readily accessible, and that takes resources and that takes strategies. And I think the business community and the philanthropic community can help districts in support of that. I also think there's a role for both entities to support school districts in talking about what was alluded to earlier in terms of what's going to happen, at least initially, around our results with state assessments. There's going to be a significant implementation dip, and there are going to be a lot of people saying, what did we do this for? And it's important that that school districts have community partners who are right next to them saying, this is the right thing to do. We need to go through this because when we get to the other end, we'll be in a much better place. And those are just a few areas where I think both the business community and philanthropic community can play a key role in supporting school districts.
Thank you, Dudley. Thank you for all of your collaboration with us. Paige, you're up next. I'm putting you on notice, but I'm going to make a quick parenthetical note. Just joking aside around cuts, I do want to say that, first of all, we enjoy a terrific relationship with the General Assembly, and we're in, I think, a very constructive dialogue and a very healthy mode with the legislature. It is the case that in the General Assembly's Appropriations Committee budget, there were some scissorings, some snips, and some slices in the education budget, and one of them was the zeroing out of the governor's proposed funding for the Common Core. So I'm joking, but I am not. And the reality is that there were, with Diana's advocacy and many other professionals' advocacy, there was a new allocation in the governor's categories for talent and Common Core for those dollars. Now, it may well be that through, and we expect it to be, that through the discussions around restoration of key elements of the budget, that will be returned, and we know we will find the resources to further support districts. These are supplementary dollars that we're asking for to help districts go beyond what they already themselves are taking the effort to expend. So We are all the more grateful for Dudley's investments through his wearing his multiple philanthropic hats on the philanthropic front, and we know that we need to keep pace and we need to make investments from the public side as well. So I just wanted to make that explicit notation and also explain the very bad comedy. And now I'm going to move on to actually ask a question of Paige. And Paige, it's terrific that you are participating in this panel. I've heard of that Achievement First organization. I know that you are making enormous strides for students, and I noted in my preface that North Star Academy, another charter school organization, is making great strides that are now measurable on an international basis, really making breakthroughs. Achievement First, likewise, based upon the data we see here in Connecticut and in New York. But there is this question that is persistent in the dialogue around the Common Core. When we raise the bar, are we serving kids who are coming from furthest behind well? How will we ensure that students in poverty and students currently at low performance levels make it? How is Achievement First grappling with that question?
This is going to be a huge change for all of us. We, as you mentioned, have schools both in Connecticut and New York, and New York has Common Core tests starting this week. So we'll tell you how we're grappling with it later this summer, but it's going to be a huge change for all of us. And Dudley, I really appreciate your comments about the need for everyone who knows how important this is to speak about it, because I think 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, when it looks like there's been this huge drop, the first reaction that everyone's going to have is to say, we should never have done this. And all of us have to keep saying, this is better for kids. In terms of how we're grappling with it, I mean, we're thinking very much at the level that Keith is thinking about, which is teachers and principals, and how do we support them in this change? Because we can all talk about what this means from a policy perspective, but it's the teachers and the principals who are actually going to have to figure out how to make this real for kids. And this is not just about a rigor bar. It's not just about, well, you used to have to know this much in 7th grade, now you have to know this much. It's also about changing the way that kids, what we want them to learn, and the complexity, the problem-solving skills, all the things that you were talking about in terms of what we actually need to know about math, not just the memorization, but the problem-solving skills. It's actually teachers to teach in a different way than many of them have been asked to teach before. So we are in the midst of a complete sort of rearticulation of our K through 12 curriculum, because what we realized is that, you know, when you're in 10th grade and 11th grade, college looks really close, and suddenly the climb seems very, very steep. And our high schools keep saying to our elementary schools, you're making the climb way too steep for these kids, because it's not steep enough in elementary school. So we've been backwards mapping the entire thing. So there's that piece, there's the curriculum piece, and then there's the training piece. I think I'm a bit of a bridge between the Common Core panel and the partnership panel, because a really important part of this for us is working in partnership with the Hartford Public Schools. One of our core values at Achievement First, that's one of my favorites, is many minds, one mission. And I think that Dr. Kishimoto and her staff and all of the Hartford Public Schools really embody that core value. My experience in working with them on thinking about curriculum, thinking about principal training, thinking about so many different issues is that they and we just want to figure out how we do this best, and we want to share with each other. We share curriculum back and forth. We share principal training strategies back and forth. We do intervisitations with our principal trainees at different schools, just trying to say this is going to be a lot of work, and we all have got to just reach out and figure out who's cracked this nut and who's cracked that nut, and let's all just share it. So we have had an incredibly productive partnership on the talent front, developing on the curricular front as we start to think about Common Core more actively.
Well said. Thank you. I'm going to open up to the panel, starting with Richard, the question that I alluded to earlier, and then I'm going to open up the field of questions to the audience. Richard, if I may return to you on the question of communication and understanding, what would the Hartford District be best served doing, and what would Connecticut be best advised to do regarding the communication about what the Common Core means, what this expected drop represents, and how can we work together to accomplish that? You've had the perspective across states on what's happening.
Sure. So One is, there's kind of two levels to it, right? So there's one which is the technical, why will we have the drop, you know, or we're asking more of our students, we're going to be asking a lot more of our teachers and our principals. So there's a technical piece to it, but that you just got to get out and say why it's important, how it connects to preparing students for post-secondary success, taking options into the workforce. But I would also say there's an emotional draw here that, as Dudley said, you need to get the business community at the front line saying why this is important. But I would ask, how many people have kids in public schools? How many people know anything about the Common Core beyond what you've just heard here? Excellent, much better than so you guys are in a better situation. But what I would say is all of you almost need to be ambassadors. So every time you're in a conversation with other parents, and this is for, you know, not just parents in general, but there will be a different reaction with urban parents, suburban parents, parents, you know, that think their kids are doing just fine, and their kids are going into the college, community college, UConn, and might be taking a remedial class. Is the amount of money we're seeing across the country being spent in remedial education after high school is just mind-blowing, right? So the amount that's being spent on it, and then the other piece, and the research is really clear on this one, is once a student gets into remedial education and post-secondary, the likelihood of getting a degree goes down dramatically. So if you're in a 2-year program, it dramatically drops. If you're in a 4-year program, it goes down some, not as much. So I would say, Stefan, it's you need to one, make sure, as we've said to governors across the country, governors at the heart of this. And the nice part about it is you have a governor that is putting his name, his legacy on this of raising the bar. Right. But I would tell you, politicians need friends when bad news hits. He needs the business community. He needs parents, because I will guarantee you there will be a lot of parents saying, not my kid. My kid's just fine. And you know, this notion of change is difficult, and as the superintendent said, change is really difficult. Unfortunately, most people have a bumper sticker on the back of their car that says, change is difficult, you go first. And what we need is change is difficult, we all need to do something significantly different.
To the rest of the panel, would anyone else like to comment on this question of communication and consequences? Dudley, please.
Yes, Commissioner, the communication piece is key. Through my work at GE and the GE Foundation's support of a number of urban school districts around the country through its Developing Futures in Education program, a number of states have taken the lead in terms of communicating this message. New York being one of them, also Kentucky, where in Kentucky the governor has combined with the business community to do public service announcements about the importance of the Common Core implementation and to tell audiences about expecting the dip in terms of test scores, but this is the right thing, and we need to do it. Another part of that conversation is actually have all of the stakeholders being willing to have a candid conversation about the nature of our current results. And that means community colleges and higher ed having candid conversations with the public about the extent of remedial education that's going on now. People sort of inside it's inside baseball in terms of knowing those rates. We need to be more forthcoming in terms of talking about to the general public what's going on. The business community needs to be more candid about their employee pools when they have job openings, the size of the pool of viable candidates and where those candidates are coming from. And in many cases, you're going to have major corporations that will tell you that particularly in the technical jobs, the candidate pool that was developed out of the local school district is very small, and that makes no sense. And commercially, over the long term, it's not particularly viable. And we need to have those types of conversations too. Part of part of the leverage we have here is what's currently not happening now, but we need to be candid about conveying that information to the general public.
Diana.
Thank you. I think one of the key areas in terms of communication as we prepare all of our stakeholders is that if there weren't a problem, we wouldn't be trying so hard to fix it. So let's remember first, what are the problems that we're trying to solve by having higher, clearer, more rigorous standards? And I think Dudley spoke very clearly about the employability of our graduates. Recently, I was at the Pathways to Prosperity conference, and Ron Ferguson shared some information about the number of weeks spent training entry-level employees who have high school diplomas. At one point, it was in a matter of weeks. Now it is 14 months. So for people to be ready to begin employment, that's an investment the business community is having to make with students that arrive not yet ready. Many of our students that graduate from high school but are not yet ready for the world that they go into become discouraged and leave. So we know that this is a very human problem. So I think we have to continue in our communication about the score drop to also focus first on the why. Why are we moving to embrace more rigorous standards and then assess for the attainment of those standards? It's because our kids need this learning for their futures. So it's about having a realistic temperature taking on where we are right now so that we can improve. The transparency with which the Hartford reform has been conducted over the past 7 years with looking at really face the brutal facts is step one. Where are we really right now so that we can plan to improve? Some states that have done a fabulous job with going fast and first give us some great lessons to learn from, and Kentucky is one of those. So a huge public relations campaign about the need for the standards and what it would mean when the standards were measured, so that when Kentucky had their first Common Core state assessment and there was a significant dip, the stakeholders were ready for it. You know, New York is taking their first Common Core assessment right now, I think, right, this month, so that'll give us some information as well. In Connecticut, our communities wanted information because it's one thing to say it's coming and it's going to be different and the kids might do worse. In fact, they're probably going to do worse. It's another thing to actually have good information. So one of the things that the State Department of Education has provided this spring is a Common Core aligned practice assessment that Hartford is a participant in. It's voluntary, but we have 110 districts participating in that. So those districts will have real information about the level of preparation in their districts, and that will inform their communication plans. Also, by the end of the school year, we will be publishing a communications toolkit that'll be available for all of our stakeholders, but very specifically targeted to the needs of communities and districts to help communities prepare stakeholders for the changes and for what the new information will mean. It is very hard to get information about your child or your children that you're educating that says that there's a problem. It's really critical that we know our actual level of achievement at this point. So we have to prepare for those conversations, prepare for what our next steps and our planning will be, and we're happy that we're going to be in a place to be supporting communities and districts. It's also very admirable that a lot of the parent communication around Common Core that's been going on is going on at the parent level, because that's a really critical level for the communication to be happening, and the district is doing a great job in that.
I think one of the things too at the school level that needs to happen in terms of communication is that for us as teachers to be effective, we need to have strong leadership with a clear vision of where we're going. And I think it's just speaking from my own personal experience, I'm lucky enough that I've got an administrator that when we made the decision that we need to ramp up our science instruction, we were able to communicate with some stakeholders, and we formed a partnership, and we were able to ramp up the level of teaching at our school. The question for all of the schools in the Hartford Public School systems, I mean, if I put myself in a principal's shoes, I'm a scientist. Do I necessarily know everything about literacy, mathematics, social studies? I know that I don't. And I know that principals, just like me, are former teachers typically. So for them, the question becomes, how do you know what you don't know? and how do you fix what you're not even sure if you're doing or not. So I guess the question becomes, and the solution potentially becomes, that collaboration piece with all of the stakeholders. Can we get the resources into the hands of the people that need it at the ground level so that they understand, here's where you need to be, and although you don't know about it, or you don't know necessarily where the goal is, I can help guide you there so that you can guide your staff there.
Well said, thank you. We're now going to open the forum up to the audience for questions. So I will look for questions from the audience. The superintendent definitely does have the privilege and is going to ask the first question. Christina, please.
So I have a question. I'd like to direct it to Richard. I'm a little bit bothered by how we are couching this as we need to communicate that there's going to be a dip. Because what we need to communicate is that we are changing expectations and resetting norms. And so we're going into a baseline year. And so we need to talk about that baseline kind of assessment around these new standards. You know, how do we change even how we're talking about this? Because I'm very concerned about the dip. We're changing expectations completely. We're trying to change practice around those expectations. And I think we need to change how we talk about this. Otherwise, it sounds like we are raising the bar within the same norms, and we're not. We're talking about doing things completely different and shifting our entire mindset through the Common Core.
So it's a good point. Let me slightly agree and slightly disagree. So it's the advantage of having an outsider.
When she controls the microphone.
That's true. If this turns off, I know I'm short-sighted. So I think you make a great point in terms of how we engage with internally with the system, with teachers and principals, but externally in terms of, will there be a performance dip? And so on one level, we can say there will, because we are still teaching the core of mathematics. The Connecticut standards, they're not, kind of defining math this way and the Common Core is defining it another way. We're getting clearer on what we are defining in terms of the progression of mathematics. One thing that we find across the country in standards is we keep repeating the same ideas from grade to grade to grade. And so we're asking teachers to do too much and not get the kids the foundational knowledge so they can go to the next topic, the next level of rigor. And so there is enough overlap where we will be saying is we are raising the bar in the performance expectations for our children. So there will be a reported performance dip. The performance hasn't changed. We're just reporting it against a higher bar and a more accurate bar that will tell me, right? So I have a third grade student in the DC public schools and a sixth grade student. I would much rather know if my children are on grade level, and grade level meant they're on the trajectory to be successful to get into college or some post-secondary education. What we typically fail to do is we don't tell the full details in fourth grade, and we only find out when they're graduating high school where they don't graduate, or they graduate and now it's 14 weeks of retraining, or they're doing remedial education. So we need to be cautious. I would say it is not, if the message is, boy, the teachers and the principals and the superintendents are doing a horrible job, you've lost the game. We are ratcheting it up. We've asked teachers to do one thing, and now we're asking them to do a very different task in terms of the rigor with which they're teaching, how they're teaching. And so the last thing I would say on this one is, this is not a, let's get 5% more efficient in the system. This is not about getting a little bit more productive or getting another small little grant on top of what you're doing. What we're seeing across the country is governors are struggling and legislators are struggling and educators are saying, how do we reallocate some of our existing dollars? How do we kind of think about expanding the pie in terms of building the partnerships? Because if what we do is in the Common Core, keep doing what we've always done and then just add a little professional development on top, you lose. This is an opportunity for everyone to come together and say to kids, your success, and reality is our success in the long run, is if we get more kids to that higher bar. And we need to give teachers and principals a little breathing room for them to do what they do best.
Another question, please. Yes, in the front.
I think it's a great idea to ask people to be ambassadors and explain what this is. I think everyone's heard of Common Core. I don't think anyone who's outside of the actual work can really explain what that's going to mean. And I've heard it explained that it's less breadth and more depth. And this question's for Paige, but others may be able to jump in. But mainly because you've been at this now and are ready to go in New York. Can you give us an example of something in language arts or something in math that's different? So, you know, instead of doing X, we're doing Y now.
That's a good question. I'm not sure I could give you a specific curricular example, except maybe to say, I think Richard was just talking about it. If we think about math standards, it used to be that mile wide, inch deep, and now it's going to be an inch wide and a mile deep. So we're actually asking teachers to take something and learn it much more deeply, and we're saying to them, some of the other stuff you used to teach, we're actually just not going to teach anymore. That's not a huge amount of that, but it really is focusing in on some of the key standards and saying kids need to know those really, really deeply. And then what we're trying to help teachers think about, and this is much more, I think this is part of the challenge of this is much more of an adaptive change, or I should say it is an adaptive change along with a technical change. So we can give them new curriculum, right, and we can give them things to follow, and we're rewriting all of our interim assessments and all the stuff. But actually the adaptive part of it is saying to them, kids really need to understand about problem solving. And so when you think about how you're going to teach this, you actually need to wait. You need to ask the question and let the kids try to get to the answer. You need to let them struggle to get to the answer. And there's going to be a lot more silence than there used to be while they're doing the work of trying to get to the answer. And so I think that's the mind shift change that Dr. Kishimoto is talking about. I think that's what we're now that we've got the stuff, we're really trying to work with the teachers on that mind shift change.
Thank you for that response. I'm going to ask Diana to add as well.
I'd just like to elaborate on the example that Paige gave. One of the 6 instructional shifts in math is focus strongly where the standards focus. And that's something that when you say it, for instance, when we say it in training situations and professional development with teachers and leaders, everybody nods because it's kind of like saying, you know, we're going to have apple pie for dessert. Yeah. Like who would argue with focus strongly where the standards focus? And isn't that kind of what we've always done? But now our standards are more focused, so it'll be easier. What we need for teachers and leaders are specific examples of what that means. So in working with some math teachers recently, an example that we've used is probability and statistics. When does it show up? Any of your math teachers will be able to tell you because they're studying the standards. It shows up first in 7th grade in the Common Core, which is different. That's a big change in Connecticut. And I said, okay, great, so they know. And knowledge is part of change. So you know what that means then. That means you need to put away the spinners. And then they look at you a little scared, right? And if you're a principal, that means you have to take away the spinners. Because the spinners are fun. And the spinners are in the math centers. And what teachers sometimes will say then is, well, what will I do in that center? Focusing strongly where the standards focus means that if what we're working on is double-digit addition, not only are we working on that in the mini lesson, because that's what our standard is, you know, for this part of this year, and not only is that what the homework's about, but all 6 parts of the center are reinforcing what kids need to be able to do double-digit addition in the beginning of 2nd grade. So we have to take away things that we may have become comfortable with or that we've built up routines around, but that are no longer at the core, at the focus. And that's not easy. So we have to be ready to help people to feel like they can be just as good, just as effective, but that they can have efficacy with the new way of doing the work so that they can make that shift without having to have a significant loss in the feeling of their practice. So those are the kinds of pieces that are part of our trainings that we're offering, and that there'll be more specific trainings framed around the 6 instructional shifts that will be part of our spring and summer work with our teachers and leaders.
Thank you, Diana. Richard, please.
Let me just give you one other example. We've all read the Declaration of Independence in probably middle school or high school. Most people, and it's taught as a historical document. And what the Common Core gives you the opportunity to do is it's a document demonstrating the evidence for defining a problem, arguing for a solution, bringing people together. So the distinction of it is some people will teach it as just, it's a powerful historical document, separate and distinct. What the Common Core is now arguing is pushing for both content knowledge, right, the historical document, but the problem solving, the ability to write, right, the ability to articulate both why you want something, and then what's interesting about it is I've seen some curricular guides that are developing around it, as students are then being asked, all right, define a problem in your school. Use the Declaration of Independence not to succeed from your school, but to argue for a solution for it. So we heard earlier about how do we get kids owning their own education. So how do we integrate these historical documents with the ability to write, to think, to problem solve, and come together as a group to figure out how do we improve what we're doing. So it's those kind of examples that become powerful about, we're not discarding an important document, we're using it in different ways.
Great. I know Tom wanted to get in now. I want to make a note to the audience. This panel was originally slated for running through 11:45. We started early, but because there are more questions, I'm going to expand this out to the remainder of the time unless I hear otherwise. Doctor? Okay.
Okay, I'll be brief. As what you're hearing from the panelists mainly has a lot to do with the kind of content knowledge that our teachers have. Let me just give you a quick example. Many, many years ago, a colleague and I did a study in a middle school in Queens, New York, where we were really trying to understand the sort of the belief systems of these 5th and 6th graders. So we gave them a series of questions, and one of the questions that we gave them was if a school is going on a trip and there are 128 children going and each bus holds 40 children, how many buses do you need? Now, if you need a calculator for that, you're in trouble, right? But the point being, we actually worked it out, and we said to the students, you need 3 1/5 buses, or 3 remainder 8. And we said to them, how many of you would give that answer? And 16 of the 20 children said, I would give that answer, that's correct, that they should order 3 1/5 buses. Now, we all know there's no such thing as a fifth of a bus. And I was pretty convinced that the students knew there was no such thing as a fifth of a bus. And by the way, the same answers, those kinds of answers that we get with young children, I get in calculus. It's amazing how time works backwards in calculus class, right? So what we did the following year was we took the same students, we gave them the same problem, and the same students gave us the same answers. About 16 out of 20 said they would give us 3 1/5 buses. But then what we did was we put phones and we had them actually order the buses. Okay? Every single child then ordered either 4 buses, 3 buses in a minivan, or 3 buses. And when we went to the children, we said, why did you only order 3 buses? They said, more than likely, some parents won't let us go on the trip, and we won't need the extra bus. See? So what we
the Office of Policy and Management of the state would like to interview those students for jobs. Yes.
So as researchers, what you come away with is that children know that there are no such things as fifth of a buses, but what their belief system about what mathematics is, it's about computation. And if we really want to produce the next generation of STEM-related people, we have to move beyond the procedural fluency. That is critical, it's important, but we have to move beyond that. And that's what the Common Core allows us to do. The critical issue is how do you first find the right curriculum, how do you begin to train people to implement it, and they have to implement it with fidelity. And the bottom line is you need people who have a strong content understanding of the mathematics.
One last thing, is that okay?
Yes.
All right, so one last thing too with teachers is from what we're talking about with Common Core is that a lot of the focus is becoming more student directed and having the student be at the center of the classroom and be at the steward of their own learning, so to speak. But for us as teachers, and I mean as any human being, okay, so you're going to put a 12-year-old at the center of a classroom and say, okay, time to go. That's a little scary, you know, because, I mean, they're developing and they're still trying to understand who they are and what it is that they can do. But for me, you know, same idea. My teaching has radically shifted so that I'm able to put the student at the center of the classroom. And with science, again, that's a scary thing. We've got all of these labs that we're doing and activities and this, that, and the other thing. And to have them exploring and trying to figure out the answer to their own problem, that's critical to developing their thought process as an adult. And if we can't develop that, then what's the point? But to be able to train teachers to see how that works in the classroom, to be able to relinquish that control, to be able to put it on the students so that they're really developing their own thought process, that's going to be the key piece to make sure this is successful.
We're going to get in 2 more questions from the audience for sure, in the middle. Go ahead, belt it out, belt it out.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I don't need my microphone.
Yes.
My name is Jackie Coleman, and I work in central office at Hartford Schools on the curriculum and instruction team. And we have these different curriculum writing teams currently working across all the content areas on articulating the Common Core in their curricula documents. And we really want them to be supportive of teachers and building leaders. And then we add on this really interesting layer at Hartford of being a portfolio school district. With a STEM school, a nursing school, an art school, all these different things, and there's a lot of thick conversations and challenges. And I'm just wondering, you guys that maybe are a little further along in some of these curriculum development areas, have any insights that I can bring back to these teams as they grapple with those 2 big challenges at the same time?
We're going to go for quick answers so we can have other questions from the audience. So who would like to take this one on? The combination of the portfolio system and the Common Core.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's make it Hartford to Hartford.
I'll go real quick. For us, one of the things that was critical to our success was identifying a path for our teachers to go on, to get developed, to get what they needed to get, to make sure that we were, developing ourselves as a science school and making sure that we were adhering to all of these raised standards. So that's going to be a critical piece, is making sure everybody's got the training and has the time to do that training. So that's, for me, that's the whole ball game.
Yes.
Kelly Wagner from the Hartford Journalism and Media Academy. I'm going to do a little bit of modeling and ask a question, if you don't mind.
Please.
Are there plans to expand or advance the technology standards to enhance or to kind of better suit theme-based schools? I know it's probably a premature question, but we have some different needs in some of our classes.
Could you just give me a little bit of clarification on what you're looking for in terms of the technology standards?
Well, some of them are a little vague as far as using diverse media to da-da-da-da-da. We'd like to get just a little bit more specific and align it with the college and career readiness and maybe some of the literacy standards.
Right.
This, in a welcome way, sounds less like a question and more like a recommendation, which I think is very good.
Well, thank you.
And it sounds like the Hartford system is stepping up to do it.
I think also, too, we have the next generation science standards that Connecticut is trying to decide whether or not we're going to be adopting. And the next generation science standards are really going to be addressing the level of rigor with which we're addressing technology and engineering and science. So that's kind of coming down the pipeline, too.
I think one of the challenges in technology education is we have existing technology education standards in Connecticut that are due to be revised. In addition, there are specific mentions of the use of technology in the Common Core in the grades 6 through 12 for literacy and the content standards. And then, as Keith references, the next generation science standards make very specific identification of technology and engineering standards. So all of these standards potentially could apply. And the challenge of this bridges both questions. The challenge is for a theme-based school is making sure that we're meeting our minimum standard of our Common Core standards and then our special standards that apply to our theme-based schools.
Okay, here we go. One more question. All set. Please, sir.
I'm of 2 minds. I actually work for Hartford Public Schools, and on the other hand, I'm a parent. So my question is going to come to you as a parent. My son blindsided me last night on the way home from soccer practice. He said, "Daddy, why is every number equal to 1? Or why is every number divisible by 1? And I said, as a former math major, I had to really think. It was a very thought-provoking question. And so my question to you is, to what extent does Common Core take into consideration that parents are oriented to a different set of standards, and you're shifting those standards, and how do you prepare parents to help scaffold students with these issues that are going to arise?"
Who'd like to take that one? Yeah.
I'll make a comment real quick. I think, sorry, I'm going to keep on going here, but I think one of the things that we need as a district and as a state is that when we go through and do our rounds of testing and whatnot, and we get that data back on each individual student, and we get the breakdown of here's where they are in math, here's where they are in reading, here's where they are in science, we need a breakdown of, okay, what's besides just math as a whole general discipline, what specific pieces of that do they know and don't they know? And if they don't know it, here are some recommendations for you as a parent to help address that with your kid. And I think that's where we're lacking. You know, we get all this data, we get all this information, everything like that, but how do we inform our parents how to educate their child when they need that remediation?
Richard.
So here's the opportunity for all of us as parents to kind of go back to school, because oftentimes when you're helping your child to do homework, you say, well, the answer's 6. That's not what the Common Core is about. How did you get to 6? So there's a couple of resources. The PTA, I think it's just pta.org now, has a long list of resources for parents, including some specific examples of what the Common Core is. I would again stress be an ambassador, and the only way you can be an ambassador on it is really picking it up, taking a look at it, and helping understand what it is that your children are starting to know. You know, there's a running joke out there that at what point do your kids pass you in their math knowledge or science knowledge? To some extent, now the game is we all have to get back into it so that we're all keeping up with our kids, not just to get the answer, but help them figure out how you got to the answer, and that's going to be crucial.
Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you. Superintendent, thank you.
So I want to make sure that I thank Commissioner Pryor. I know how busy your schedule is for coming and being part of an important dialogue here in the city of Hartford, and all of the panelists who are here today. I thank everyone for being here for an extensive conversation around what's best for kids and what we need to do next. And I hope that we will continue this dialogue moving forward. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.